Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples integrated recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice, no sugarcoating, no platitudes, no bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating the same old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. You can waste years of your life calling it patience. Think about how some people stay in the same job, same relationship, same recovery loop, same half-built identity, and telling themselves that something is forming underground. And maybe it is. A gardening phrase comes to mind: sleep, creep, leap. It's a phrase to describe a 3-year establishment pattern that exists with a lot of plants. Sleep is where the plant puts a lot of the energy into a root system underground. Year 2 is creep, where it wakes up and the expanded roots start to grow, and then you start to see some foliage. And then year 3, leap, where there is this massive established root network and the plant shoots up. But the work is to know whether or not roots are actually taking shape, or maybe nothing is forming. Maybe your waiting is a way that you are avoiding a moment that you have to admit that the soil is dead. Maybe the waiting is the way that you are avoiding the point where the evidence is no longer confusing. The relationship has had the same conversation 10 times, and there is no new trust or repair or behavior change. Or maybe the career keeps asking you for more and more, but it's not producing any new skills or freedom or meaning or future for you. Maybe it is the same recovery language, feeling sharper and sharper, but the actual pattern is untouched, where you have the same resentments, the same secrecy, same avoidance, and the same relapse logic, but wearing cleaner clothes or better vocabulary. The effort is real. The soil is no longer giving you anything back. And at some point, continuing to water this is no longer about patience. Instead, it's refusal to look at the ground. So the question to sit with today with this episode is, the thing that you are waiting for, is this building capacity? If the wait is increasing your tolerance, judgment, honesty, skill, steadiness, or discernment, then the slowness has a job. But if it is producing resentment, passivity, self-deception in the same loop with a more respectable explanation attached to it, then patience is part of the problem. So that is this whole conversation. I'm going to use a quote from Epictetus, one of my favorite Stoics. And there is a quote that cuts through motivational language around patience. In Discourses, he talks about figs and grapes needing time to ripen. And the quote is, "If someone says to me, 'I want a fig right now,' the answer is simple. That's not the way that things work. First, the tree blossoms, then the fruit forms, then the fruit ripens. If the fruit cannot mature in an hour, why would a human mind mature on demand?" And this quote works because it does not give a sentimental comfort. It does not shame the desire for fruit. It tells the truth about sequence. Living systems develop in order. You can want confidence right now. You can want discipline right now. You can want healing, maturity, peace, emotion mastery, emotional stability, any of those things right now. But desire does not create ripeness. Pressure does not skip stages, and wanting fruit does not mean that a tree is ready. So this is where patience has to be more than waiting. Waiting is just time passing. Patience is the discipline of staying in the sequence long enough to see if something is actually forming. The harder question is whether there is a tree even at all, because a fig tree takes time to mature, but dead soil needs an intervention. Confusing these two situations is how people lose years of their life. Now, y'all know that I can be kind of critical of peer-led recovery, flattening complex concepts, and I'm going to take the position that impatience is not just a character defect, because in recovery spaces, impatience is called a character flaw or a character defect, and I understand why that language exists, because it can make a person reactive, demanding, short-sighted, or controlling. Addiction recovery requires confrontation with urgency and ego. Nobody gets far in their recovery while treating every single impulse that happens as a sacred thing. Still, wrapping every developmental struggle in moral language is crude, and I have met plenty of people outside of addiction recovery spaces who have never had a problem with drugs or alcohol who also struggle with patience. Okay, so this isn't alcoholic thinking. Anxiety does this. Trauma does this. Chaotic childhoods do this. High responsibility nervous systems do this. And if waiting used to mean danger, then stillness will feel exposed. If no one came to help you when you were younger, then delay will feel like abandonment. And if you learned early that collapse follows passivity, then your body probably treats uncertainty as a threat long before your mind has any time to reason with that. So impatience is often a biological default colliding with a future-oriented mind. The human body evolves around short feedback loops, meaning with your nervous system, a threat appears. I've described this multiple times of like my nervous system can't tell the difference between being pissed off at Publix and being chased by a lion. So threat appears, action follows. Hunger appears, you eat food. Danger appears, the body prepares to move. That's what your nervous system is wired to do. Your nervous system was never designed to comfortably tolerate long stretches of ambiguity while waiting to see if something invisible is developing underneath the surface. That is why impatience feels physical. The mind starts hunting for closure. The system wants an open loop shut because unresolved things feel like a threat even if the threat does not have a clean shape, and obviously it's not a lion. Now, waiting gets a hell of a lot harder when the outcome has no contract that's attached to it. 6 months is one thing if the finish line is real, but 6 months in a process that might fail or change shape or expose the wrong fit or ask more of you than you wanted to give hits the nervous system differently because the body starts treating the open question like a threat. It wants that pressure gone. The question to sit with is, are roots forming or is it dead soil? So there are different variants of that Epictetus quote, or there's one about bamboo that you plant the seed, water it, see nothing for years, and then suddenly it just rapidly shoots up. The lesson being that growth was happening underneath the whole time. So sometimes that is true, and sometimes nothing is happening because nothing is happening. There are seasons when roots are truly forming and skills are developing, your tolerance is increasing, judgment improving, emotional capacity expanding, and it might only have a small visible payoff, but the structure underneath is strong, and that kind of waiting is definitely productive, even if it's uncomfortable and even if you don't really see it in real time. But there are also seasons where the waiting is just circular. Maybe there's no new skill, no clarity, no deeper honesty, and a person is reflecting or giving it time, but nothing is really going anywhere. So I think in particular, I've worked at a few small agencies as a police officer. And in two of the agencies that I worked at, they were like 30 or less officer agencies. So with that, you basically have shifts of 2, 3, maybe 4 officers, a supervisor, maybe they have a detective, maybe they've got like a boat unit or something like that. But these are stagnant agencies where usually somebody is a sergeant or lieutenant or whatever. I mean, it's locked up that the people who are in any positions that would create any kind of movement, they are not going anywhere. Why would they leave their cushy $150,000 gig where they don't have to do anything? They're not going anywhere. And so it leaves you at the bottom, or speaking for myself, leaves me at the bottom as a police officer driving around in circles for 6 years, waiting for that carrot dangle. And occasionally, getting strokes from command staff that's like, you keep making all these arrests and someday something good's going to come. Someday you're really going to be something at this agency. This, I think, is an example of dead soil where you just keep on waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. If I think about how much time I wasted driving around in circles on Marco Island or in Lincolnshire, Illinois. Now I go visit my mom. I go drive over the Marco Island Bridge. I think about how much I've done in 7 years since leaving law enforcement and how much I've developed. And I'm like, my God, I cannot think if I was riding around on this rock in the Gulf of Mexico, working for this corrupt city, making 50 grand a year. Holy shit. That is definitely a dead soil example. Let's talk about the unsexy grind of actually growing roots and really actually building something. So when I was in grad school, I wanted the outcome. I pictured, me getting my diploma, the master's degree. In fact, when I had actually earned my master's degree, the boss that I was working for teased me. So is everyone here going to have to start calling you master now? And I said, no, that's just at home. But so I imagined having the degree and practicing competently and being taken seriously. I pictured this identity that came with it. Kind of the same way that when I was like 7 days sober, I was imagining my speech that I was going to give a year sober, like I knew anything about anything a year sober either. The fantasy did not do the work. The work looked like a time hop that pops up every year of me at 1 o'clock in the morning reading an 800-page group therapy book while my dog Freddie is yawning. Maybe I'll use that as the picture for this episode. That's what grad school actually looked like. Not glamorous, not cinematic, reading hundreds of pages of material, writing discussion posts pre-ChatGPT, responding to classmates, applying theory, trying to understand research, trying to understand words that I didn't understand, connecting those ideas to my lived experience and repeating that process long enough until it was no longer novelty and instead I could just do the research and write the thing easily without even thinking about it. Now, some other students approached this like it was a credentialing process. They checked the boxes enough to pass. They posted enough to get credit. They replied to the people in the discussion posts like 20 minutes before the assignment closed. Get the degree, move on. I'm not saying that with moral outrage. The system rewards that. There are plenty of academic structures that make it very easy to just perform learning without building depth. I treated these assignments like real training. I wanted the credential, yeah, but I also understood that the degree only granted access. That doesn't actually create mastery. The degree opens the gate. Competency is built after the gate opens. And there is a kind of boredom that is involved in real development that is rarely respected. There's no applause when you are just doing the reading, when you're sober and you're just going to meetings, doing the thing, when you're at the gym on the treadmill, the same damn treadmill every day. There's nothing sexy about that, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and doing the thing. That, I think, is real patience. But waiting around and hoping that something is going to change, driving around in the same circle on Marco Island, that's not building much. Staying engaged in a process that is actually forming capacity does. Now, I'm going to go back to like grad school, for example. A lot of counselors or, new professionals struggle with imposter syndrome. And I don't struggle with that, not because I think I know everything, but I also never claimed fluency ahead of structure. I did not build a professional identity that was based on performance before there was repetition underneath it. Confidence comes from load bearing when it is built through boredom, consequence, correction, failure, reading, supervision, repair, and repetition. The nervous system begins to trust itself because it has been tested under pressure. Imposter syndrome is something that shows up when identity gets claimed before capacity exists, before the roots exist. And a person might have the title or the credential. They might say, "Call me doctor." But underneath that, the structure has not been tested enough to actually be trustworthy, so the nervous system is scanning for exposure. All of us start somewhere. Being new is part of the process. The problem begins when identity outruns structure and the person is performing certainty instead of building capacity. So I see this in the field often. At one point, my practice was so full when I was taking all those insurance panels, I was trying to refer clients out to other therapists. So I would look for, I need a good DBT therapist that I can refer people out to. This is a therapy framework. So I would go on a website, Psychology Today, and see who is somebody that offers DBT therapy. I call the person, and within like 5-10 minutes of talking to another therapist, I realize there's no depth here. This person does not understand DBT concepts, and they think that they're a DBT therapist because they use a fucking Dear Man worksheet. That's a assertive communication style from one of the modules in DBT training. Like anybody, you right now, you, the listener right now, can go on a website called therapistaid.com and search for Dear Man, DEARMAN. And right now, somewhere there is a therapist charging you $100 an hour to print something off and go through a worksheet with you that you could have probably done yourself. That's not being a DBT therapist. Depth reveals itself over time, and so does the absence of it. The point here is structure. Anything that is expected to carry pressure needs time to be load-bearing. A fast-growing tree might look impressive, but then collapse under weight. And a clinician, a therapist, can look polished and still lack depth. Just like a relationship might move fast and lack trust, or a recovery identity can sound really strong and then fall apart when it stops cooperating. Your roots matter. So, internal patience. This is where it gets ugly. It's easier to accept slow timelines outside of self. For example, a master's degree takes a few years. Building a business takes years and a repetition. Craft takes practice. A body getting stronger at the gym needs repeated exposure to weight and load. Then you turn inward and demand immediate maturity. So I have lots of clients that understand their own patterns, but they expect the behavior to be different just because they can explain the wound thinking that like the reaction is going to disappear, or that they know the coping mechanism and then expect to stop reaching for it. When behavior lags behind insight, then you might start hearing the negative self-talk or self-attack, like, I should be further along, or I already know this stuff. Why am I still doing it? So a lot of times I'll have clients that I'll say something and they'll say, I know. Well, insight gives you orientation. It does not reorganize behavior. Change usually requires repetition under tolerable stress. Your nervous system needs enough challenge to adapt and enough containment to still stay online. If there is too little pressure, then it feels stagnant. Too much pressure creates collapse. Patience with yourself is realism about how systems change. Understanding something is stage one, living it consistently is another, and that gap is frustrating because the mind wants knowledge to count as completion. It wants the explanation to become a different life. It wants recognition to be transformation, but that's not how development works. The cruelest part of patience is that sometimes it reveals an answer that you were not trying to get. Sometimes what you wanted is not forming. Now we're looking at a kind of waiting that looks disciplined from the outside, but is really just a way to keep hope alive past a point where evidence actually supports it. Maybe you're giving a relationship time because you're hoping that the next conversation is going to be different, or you keep staying in the same job hoping that the next opening or promotion or supervisory role might make it feel like all of the years of driving around in the same circle were building towards something. Or maybe you're using the same recovery language because you're hoping that the right phrase or meeting or spiritual posture will eventually touch the pattern that has really stayed unchanged. And that's where patience can be kind of slippery, because the effort can be real, the desire can be real, the hope can be real. A person can genuinely want change. A job could genuinely have potential. Relationship could genuinely have had love at some point or somewhere interwoven in it. The process may genuinely have helped at a point, but it could also stop producing life. And at a certain point, the question has to move from how much longer should I wait to what is this wait actually building? If the same conversation keeps happening over and over and there is no new trust or repair or accountability or behavior is forming, then the waiting is giving the pattern more time to survive. If the career keeps asking for more of you, but it's not giving you any new skills, then it is keeping you loyal to a ceiling that has already shown itself. And if the recovery language becomes more rehearsed, that you can cite the page numbers from the big book, but your behavior still stays the same, then waiting is protecting the appearance of growth while the pattern underneath is untouched. All of that is dead soil. Dead soil does not mean that the original hope was stupid. It means that the environment is no longer giving you anything back. You can keep watering it, praying about it, reframing it, and calling it patience, but the ground is telling you the truth. This is the part that people really avoid, because admitting dead soil comes with loss. You're not just making a decision about what comes next. You have to admit what didn't happen. You're admitting that the version that you were waiting for or that you had imagined is not going to come to fruition. You're admitting that the time and the loyalty and effort and hope that you had invested in something did not become what you needed it to become. And that kind of recognition hurts. So people just stay busy instead, or they reframe it quickly, or they call their endurance loyalty, or the stuckness commitment to the process. They keep the future alive in their head because letting that future die would make the present impossible to keep justifying. Patience with timing requires honesty. It requires noticing if the wait is actually building capacity or if it is grief avoidance. It requires admitting that the thing that you hoped was going to ripen might not be ripening. It requires seeing the difference between a slow-forming root system and a patch of ground that's not giving you anything back. The goal is not endless patience. If something is forming, time deepens it. But if something is dead already and the soil is sour, then time exposes it. Epictetus's fig tree example is useful because it's simple. First, the tree blossoms, then the fruit forms, then the fruit ripens. Desire does not skip that sequence. Pressure does not skip that sequence. A better explanation does not skip that sequence. You cannot harvest confidence before repetition. You cannot harvest trust before consistency. You cannot harvest maturity before frustration tolerance. You cannot harvest mastery before boredom, effort, and correction have done their work. And you cannot keep watering dead ground forever, calling the absence of fruit a timing issue. Patience is not waiting, it's timing, and timing is knowing when roots are forming and when the ground has already told you the truth, and knowing which is doing the work. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to people around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we're all capable of growing past that. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. In the meantime, thanks again for listening. I'll see you on the next one.